You are now listening to Sophisticulture, a podcast by OBSCURAE Productions. If you enjoy this episode, please consider buying us a coffee. Your support helps us continue bringing you our coverage and episodes, including the podcast, our articles, and our TikToks. The link is in the podcast description. Thanks in advance. Quick addendum before we start. I did record an original introduction to this podcast, which is from a couple weeks ago. But it is Monday the 9th of December, and last night here in London, KNEECAP swept the BAFTA Awards, won 7 of its 14 nominations, including the top honour at the ceremony, Best British Independent Film. It also won Best Debut Screenwriter, Best Joint Lead for KNEECAP as a trio, Best Casting, Best Editing, Best Original Music, and Best Music Supervision. We couldn't be prouder of the film, and we couldn't be more excited to share with you this interview with the producer of the film, Trevor Birney. Here's the intro I made earlier. To quote Blue Peter, here's one I made earlier. So if you haven't seen KNEECAP, first off, where have you been? But KNEECAP has to be one of the most innovative, interesting, fantastic films I've seen this year. There are very few of them that I've seen this year. That's not shade to people. It's just that KNEECAP set a bar far beyond what a lot of people were doing this year. It had a lot to cover. It had to introduce you likely to a band internationally that we'd never heard of before, and language you've likely never heard in such volume, which is the Irish language. It had to teach 3 members of a Irish rap band how to act, which they did to the most intensely amazing effect. It had to be both information dense and visually brilliant and beautiful, and cover the entire history of the band in an interesting, engaging way that didn't lose you at any points to its confusion or absurdity. It had to cover history, a lot of Irish history, Northern Ireland Irish history, Belfast history. And it had to be amazing. It had to be amazing because it needed to cross over. To have achieved all of those things in one film, to me, is like what we're all in it for. And the fact that KNEECAP have now been the film is the most nominated this year at the BAFTA Awards should tell you everything you need to know. Not just about the quality of the film, but the quality of the filmmakers. Now, Rich Pepiat, who was the director, and KNEECAP, who were the band, I didn't actually get a chance to find their emails or interview them, and I was far too nervous to ask. But do you know who I did manage to get a glimpse into was the producer, Trevor Birney. Now, he was doing a talk with the BFI at the Film Production Labs about KNEECAP, and I cannot tell you, dear reader, how enigmatic that panel, shall we say, was. This was a producer's producer. This was someone that was talking about their film, not just in the kind of effusive ways that people do as they're trying to explain kind of how a film comes together and what amazing aspects of the film and team members of the film come together. But this was also someone dropping gems of wisdom all over the place. And as a producer, as someone who is an artist trying to make things, it was so illuminating to me, that talk. And Trevor, as you will hear in this interview, is one of the most interesting storytellers, one of the most interesting people. He's had such an interesting career leading up to KNEECAP, which tells you, if you are a fan of the film, if you've seen the film, why the film has this uniquely kind of almost documentary feel to it, even though it is narrative, even though it plays with the form and is a bit absurd and is fiction, technically. It is a life story, it is history, it is information, and it is all delivered in the most engaging and effective way. That's because you're watching a film made by investigative journalists. And that is something you don't get to say every day. And it's a feature fiction film made by investigative journalists like Rich Pepiat and Trevor Birney. So It was an honor to speak to Trevor specifically about what his involvement and his perspective on the film is, and how he got into the film and what that process was like, and also about the thing he wanted to platform, the sophisticulture question, which is, what is one thing that you want to highlight to the audience that you maybe would not get to say on a press tour or during an awards circuit interview? One thing do you want to highlight? And we were very lucky because Trevor has a book that has just been published called Shooting Crows. I will not spoil what the book is about, or the history of what the book is about, or the topic of the book. None of it. I will spoil none of it because, like I said, Trevor is an amazing storyteller and he can tell it much better than I can. But I will say this. I am so honored that of the two interviews, the three interviews that I have had with documentary filmmakers this year, all three are sweeping kind of the awards circuit right now. From Ground Zero is the Palestinian nominee for Best International Film. KNEECAP is now the nominee for Ireland for Best International Film. And Seeking Mavis Beacon is up for an IDA Documentary Award, which no three films are more deserving for all of those accolades. But I especially even said to Trevor, don't know if I said it in the interview, but I certainly said it before the interview, and I certainly said it after the interview. When I found out KNEECAP was the most nominated film at the BIFA Awards this year, I was like, it could not have happened to a better film. You know, sometimes these things don't always line up, and the person that sweeps, you're like, oh. But this really is a really important moment for my faith and hope in the film industry, because KNEECAP was top 3, and it certainly wasn't number 2 or number 3 film of the year for me. In what it attempted to accomplish and what it managed to accomplish. Gargantuan in both scope and in precedent. And I think we're entering an era of very authentic, raw storytelling that allows us all to communicate with one another about the histories and the traumas of our countries, but also about our joys and the ways that we handle those histories. You know, the ways that we overcome, is overcome the correct word? The ways that we manage those histories, the ways new generations especially manage those histories. And I'm so grateful that films like that choose to come and share their knowledge and their talent with the podcast, and that we're able to hear from them directly. And so here, in potentially the crowning achievement of my year, is an interview with Trevor Birney, producer of the spectacular film KNEECAP. Enjoy.
Hi, Umbia, it's Trevor. I'm really delighted to meet you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So much for being on Sophisticulture. As I just told you, we're obsessed with KNEECAP, and so happy for you that you have won all of these nominations for the film and awards at Sundance, and just been sweeping the globe. I thought I could bring you to the Sophisticulture audience specifically because you are the producer of the film. One of, I'm sure, a couple, but the one that I found to be the most enigmatic when I found you through the BFI, and your journey from investigative journalism and documentary into a film that I think plays with the form of information as well as fiction, as well as real life adaptation so well. So I wanted to ask you what that transition was like, and when it was Rich that came to you with the idea. What was it about that idea that you were like, okay, yes, years of my life will be dedicated to this idea?
Well, I probably didn't think right off that it was going to be years of my life. And I think that none of us probably do. Whenever you come to an idea, you don't immediately think this is going to take up forever. A lot of my time forever. Somehow it gets you, and there's a passion, or there's an immediate emotion to an idea, and that's for me whether it's a documentary idea or this idea, and but also there probably has to be some sort of fertile ground that it comes to you on, and the fertile ground had been created by this relationship that Rich and I had began to build. Rich had been born and brought up in England, and Richard worked as a journalist here in London, and had come to some notoriety as a result of his resignation from the Daily Star when he walked away from the Daily Star So shocked and horrified by some of the practices that he'd seen there and witnessed there. But Rich had been lucky enough to marry a woman from West Belfast, beautiful Danielle. And Danielle and Rich had taken a decision to bring their beautiful young daughters and move back to Belfast in 2019. And when he came back
just before 2020.
Just before 2020. And he at that point, Rich was sort of coming into Belfast and looking around going, well, what's the scene here? What goes on? What actually happens in Belfast? And of course, you'd been traveling back and forward with Danielle and the kids, and had got to know Belfast, but he would never worked there, and he'd never really known what exactly was the production sector, what exactly was the film industry, who was working in it, what was happening, and all of that. So him and I used to have cups of cappuccino in coffee shops on the Lisburn Road, close to their home, and just talk about the world and talk about what we were doing as journalists and as documentarians and the films we were doing. And Rich began to become more and more engaged with our work and helping us and coming with ideas. And then one night he went out in Belfast and he came to me and he came in Monday morning and said, "That's it. I've seen the future."
Yes.
And it's called KNEECAP. And just at that point, I was aware of KNEECAP, and I was aware of this growing awareness of KNEECAP and what was going on. And
They'd only been together a year at that point. They'd started in 2018.
2017 was really that.
Was it?
Yeah, and they'd been playing more and more gigs. They'd been going for I'm not sure whether it was a year or, but it's 2017. They were very young, and you know they were playing the Limelight, and the Limelight in Belfast is probably a couple of hundred people.
Oh,
you know, so that's what you're talking about. It's a very famous club right in the centre of town, and it's and KNEECAP were cutting their teeth, and were still probably raw and edgy at that stage, as they still are in many ways. But Rich saw something in them, and that is the brilliance, and that is the genius, right?
Truly.
He actually saw something that nobody else. We'd all walked past that. It'd been hiding in plain sight, all of us. And Rich went to that gig and enjoyed the gig, and came home. And I think I think he really did sit up all night going, I don't know, there's something here. Yeah. And immediately, it wasn't about a documentary. And even though him and I had been talking about documentaries, it was about a script. And he said, right, I'm going to write the script. Leave it with me. But this first challenge was to meet with them, and somebody had given
it. Took 6 months to get them to say yes.
Well, somebody had given him an email. Like,
wow,
can you imagine? Wow. Yeah, let me sit down and write an email to KNEECAP. Dear KNEECAP, I hope this finds you well.
That's the industry way of doing it. You send the cold email through the contact form.
My name is Rich, and needless to say, they never read the email.
Oh
I don't know whether they ever opened it, but even if it was the right address. But what he discovered is that one of our Irish language researchers knew KNEECAP.
Yes, was this the Irish language that was the wife cap? Okay.
And she'd gone out with Nisha. She'd been and she says, here, I'll call them. And Rich goes, you can call them? I go, yeah, I can call them. So next thing, Rich is spending time with KNEECAP, and to be honest, and I was just talking about this morning. The time that he invested even at that stage, and I cannot begin to tell you that Rich will never, ever, ever be compensated for the time that he put into this film.
Really?
Never.
Wow.
You know, Rich has dedicated most of the last 5 years of his life to this film. And he's been paid for his script and for directing the film. That goes nowhere near what Rich has actually done for this film. Right at the start, the research that went into the film, Rich embedded himself in, and like and to him, and that's where investigative journalism comes out of it. He was going, listen, if I'm going to tell this story, I need to understand the story. And to understand the story, I need to understand them as individuals. I need to understand their backgrounds. I need to understand their language. I need to be able to communicate with them in their language. So Rich had to go off, and he was doing 3 classes a week, learning Irish.
Wow.
Because KNEECAP said, I think that was one of the first things he said, if you're going to tell our story, you've got to tell it in our language. And Rich's dedication was he went off, he had found a personal tutor, and he got his gold badge.
Wow.
He passed his exam, and he very proudly wore his badge.
That's
so
it,
he got, and that
You really feel it. It's an authentic, think that even lends itself to the fact that at the end, I'll tell you, it was so embarrassing. I audibly gasped when I realized that they were the three of the band. They weren't actors. I know you've mentioned that, like, people have found that unbelievable. I gasped audibly, everyone was looking at me. But it lends itself to that authenticity.
I know exactly that moment because I've experienced that, and the first time I experienced was at Sundance Film Festival when we premiered there on the opening night of the festival back in January. So you've got a big theater, they call them theaters in the US, 700 people, of which less than 5% were Irish and knew anything about KNEECAP, and that was the cast and crew that were there. And you heard these American audience that knew nothing about KNEECAP. And it was the penny dropping at the end that realized, oh my God, they are an actual band. And we've just watched their story. And it's like,
as they performed, I was like, even DJ Provi, yes? That was the one where I was like, you've got to be kidding. That was not an actor. That was him. Wow.
Well, that's interesting because when I walked out of that cinema that first night in Sundance, and there were some friends of ours from LA, and I would chat to one, and they would say, DJ Profi, he is stunning. And then someone else came in and said, oh, Liam Oak, he's going straight to Hollywood. He should just go straight to Hollywood.
All three. Such great actors.
Yes.
So beautiful on screen. Like, so photogenic.
And Nisha and the subtlety and the intelligence. And listen, Nisha's playing against Michael Fassbender.
I know.
It's amazing. And we were going, going back into that moment and wondering how would they perform against someone like Michael. And like, Michael is such a generous, warm-hearted, brilliant, wonderful man, and he was just like, he just in love with these guys, and could see what they could do. So yes, I mean, right back at the start, nothing that you see on screen is by chance. Nothing hadn't been thought out to the nth degree, and that was Rich's diligence that he did day after day. Through lockdown, we were on Zooms back and forward. But the moment the script landed, the moment that first draft landed, and we were a long way off the final draft, but we knew Rich had nailed it. There was something incredibly special, something incredibly fresh and challenging. And I really do not think there is a filmmaker in Ireland that could have done what Rich has done. I really think that Rich basically didn't come with any biases or prejudices He was going to go, I'm an Englishman coming in to tell this story about Irish language in this band, and I'm going to say whatever I like, and that's what he did, and that's the brilliance, and that's the freshness, and everything. It is just, and the authenticity. And I remember speaking to Americans going, what is it you bloody love about this film? Because I get it, but do you get it? And they go,
a word.
They give me something and it was real, authentic. That's those are the words that they used. And then when Sony Pictures Classic brought in audiences to test the film, I was going, what are they saying? They said, real, authentic. This is something that they can relate to, and that's
universal on that level. Especially that I felt that it was rebellious. It's not just in terms of the story, but visually, it was a vibe as much as it was a story, and it was so visually well done. I give props to Rich for that as well.
And that is true, because I think that then, even if you don't understand the language, and I think some people in America, I think some
don't
people
even understand the accent.
We thank God for the subtitles, because I doesn't understand any English. They were peelers and the language that they were using. What are these words? So they were going like, but it's the vibe. They got the vibe. They got it, and it is. And that is the brilliance in the script and the visual storytelling. It transcends it all, and that somehow it just hits you right in the cortex. It just gets you.
It was amazing, and I want to bring it back to your involvement and how, because we don't let any title in a credit go unspoken about, because directors do so much and producers do so much, so the directors can do so much. So in terms of your side of contributing to this film, before we get on to handing the mic back over, I'm fangirling a little bit. How was it for you getting this off the ground, taking this into offices, into meetings, into Zoom meetings, probably more so, and trying to explain not just to maybe Irish partners, but also British or international partners and festivals even what this is and was going to be even when it wasn't made yet?
Well, I think that, you know, there's an awful lot of unique aspects to this film. And I think the funding journey that we went on was somewhat unique.
Okay.
In that the script spoke for itself. This wasn't a film that we went to funders or financiers or sales agents or distributors and talked about a concept. We didn't pitch this film as a concept. It was, here's the script, and that's a incredibly important moment that you hand over a piece of work and wait for the reaction. So Rich's work, unpaid, spec, script. Once we had that, we knew there was something special. And I'd called a friend in Dublin, Patrick O'Neill at Wildcard Distribution, who I'd worked with on documentaries for many years. So we had this friendship, never mind this business relationship. But I called Patrick and then said, do you know KNEECAP? He says, yeah, of course I know KNEECAP. I says, I'm working on this project, writer's writing. If it's any good, are you up for getting involved? Because absolutely, send me the script. So I had someone then as well that I could relate to, and the script landed. I was able to send it to Patrick, and Patrick came back, this is great. And yeah, there were notes, of course,
yes.
But we immediately knew there was something. So the funding journey then started in that going in very gently to the two main funders in Ireland, Northern Ireland Screen in Belfast and Screen Ireland in Dublin, and saying to them, this is a script that's going to be 50% in the Irish language and in the English language. Oh, who's it written by? Oh, you've never heard of him. Oh, really? Yes. You've never heard of him. You're going to know a lot about him, but you've never heard of him. And I even heard there's an Irish language broadcast fund that's run by a friend of mine, Anya Walsh, and she spoke last week in Belfast, and I heard somebody was telling me that Anya was going she was looking at Rich going, who is this guy? What?
Came out of nowhere.
Who is this guy? And he's like, what? And he's going to speak his language. And she grew to respect just simply because of the script. And I knew immediately that I thought it was always going to be attractive on the island of Ireland. But how are we going to get buy-in from London? Would the BFI see the value in this? Then my colleague in London, Jack Tarling, he spoke to charades in Paris. And he's going the charades, the sales agent, I think.
I have to say, you on that slate for this year, charades have done some of the best films of the year, in my opinion. They're also on Meet the Barbarians with Judy Delpy. When I saw you on that list, I'm like, yes.
And I think that again, that is the strength of their curation. I think that is so sophisticated and wonderful. Of course, I'm going to say that I'm very biased, but they could see something, and I think they could almost see something that I didn't see. They could see the value in the script. They could see the freshness. They could see how
it plays, especially with our generation. I think that's probably what they get. It's just that rebellion.
It is.
It's universal.
It is, exactly. And I think that these scripts don't come along every day, and I think that they knew there was something that was going to appeal to that demographic, to that younger demographic. And I didn't know whether the film would travel outside Ireland. I knew that the financiers in Ireland generally would, once they understood the quality and understood where Rich was coming from and his POV, they would support him, and they did. But it's the BFI. I was going the BFI is good. The BFI is good. What? And I was lucky enough to spend some time with Louise from BFI last night, and we're just talking about it again. And she was just going, listen, it was amazing. She says, once I read it, we were there, and so we were very lucky, and that gives the project it raises the project. The BFI coming gives it a stamp of approval. It gives everyone else a bit of confidence. BFI's in this. Okay, this is. And so then it was about, but all the while you can understand that's a very slow, deliberate process. Raising public money, quite understandably, it's taxpayers' money, is a slow, deliberate, bureaucratic process. That's what I was involved in, whereas this racehorse, Rich Pepiet, was going, I'm going to shoot this film on an iPhone. I'm just going to.
That's me.
Exactly. Listen, Trevor, just can you give me 30 grand?
Yeah.
30 grand. I'll commit this film for 30 grand. And I'm going, Rich,
Yeah.
hold back.
Yeah.
I'm going to get you a little bit more money than that. Just hold back. Listen, the boys are getting older. I'm worried that, the boys are, this is going to happen. I'm going like, yeah, I'll get a couple of my friends to come and they'll play the other roles. And hold on. Yeah. So it was constantly. And Rich, finally, we got into June. Rich could see the buy-in from the BFI, the buy-in from Screen Art.
That it was building to something bigger. Yeah.
And the challenges that were coming, notes were coming in. So he was having to go back and redraft and rescript and rework the characters and all of that, and it was just getting better and better and better. And but yeah, it is the process of raising those monies was
That's
it
something
took
I've
time.
been hearing all year about BFI. Like, every talk I've gone to, it's like, listen, be prepared. BBC, BFI, Film 4, they will take a while, a lot longer than you're used to if you're just a scrappy kind of get a phone together, get a crew together, type production.
And that is understandable. It is frustrating for producers. Producers want things to happen quickly. 100%. And directors wants to happen. And everybody wants, let's get this film in. But I think there were key moments, and I think that the vindication in that came when Rich could see the level of the budget we're going to be able to raise and what that was going to mean, and then bringing in the DOP Ryan Kernahan, another key moment, and getting them together, and Rich and him were getting into great creative conversations, and you could see the value of that, where Ryan was saying, listen, forget about the iPhone, Rich.
Exactly.
This is going to be cinematic. This is going to be, let's do it. And that was, you could see the value coming out of that with Rich all the time. So there was momentum that was created. It was slow, but it was a momentum. There was the ball was rolling down the hill, and Rich could see that it was going to be for the benefit of everything. And then there were key moments. Michael Fassbender coming on board.
Wow. A coup. And one of the most amazing performances I think I've seen out of him, on the screen ever.
Just mind blowing. And I'll never forget the moment that we were all in this. Again, it's ironic. It was an old newspaper building where you used to print the Belfast Telegraph, which is one of Northern Ireland's main daily newspapers, and they've moved to new premises, and there's this huge building vacant, and we shot the end of the movie in this building, in that big gig that we did, like 700 people there one night. Wow. And that was Michael's first day on set. Wow. Michael Fassbender, that was his first day on set. Wow. And Michael Fassbender walked in, and it was just, I remember all of us around the monitor just jaw-dropping awe because it felt that the film we were about 2.5 weeks into the shoot at that stage, and we knew that it was looking pretty special. And then just for Michael to walk on, it's just the stillness, the creative force that he brought, it just lifted everybody. Making films isn't easy. There's no part of the process that is easy. The fundraising, production, the post-production, everything is challenging, and you have got to be in love with it. You've got to love it, because if you don't, and if you're not passionate about it, you pack up and go home, because
it's miserable. And
it is miserable, exactly. And
if you don't love it.
Yeah, you've got to love it. And all through this process, you're dealing with budgets, and I remember that night that Michael came on set, I was dealing with some other crisis around finances, and that my memory was seeing Michael was a way of sort of clinging to the aspiration of it while dealing down and dirty with how the hell are we going to get to the end and not run out of money. So there were key moments, Michael coming on board, Simone Kirby, all the other cast pieces all falling into place. It was all part of that journey, but nothing prepared us for the first day on set, which is the scene that we shot with the guys digging up the back garden.
Oh my God.
That was the first morning on set, and that was the first time that anyone outside of Rich had seen the guys acting, because Rich had gone into acting classes with the guys.
Yes, I heard.
So, there's three of them, so it made sense. There's this incredible guy called Kieran Lagan from Queen's University in Belfast, and Kieran basically put the guys through a 3-year degree in 6 months, and fair play to KNEECAP, and that's it. KNEECAP turned up every day. They went through that. You know, they were on tour, they were running around and everything else, but they invested their time in going to those classes, and we all benefit from what they did right then. And Rich was really enjoying it. He was rolling around the floor with them. So he could see, the performances that they were capable of. But we were all standing in the back garden of that, semi-detached house and kind of going, can these guys actually act, And oh Jesus, they can. And they're like naturals, just naturals. And they were, it was completely surreal for them. They're used to being on stage and performing, but suddenly, there's 40 crews sitting around with clipboards and, action, go. And it's like, okay, we're going to do that again. Okay, go. And it's like, it was fantastic. It was, again, it's one of those days. There are many, many days in this project that lifted our souls. Yeah. And that was one of them. That was actually one of them. And the energy that came off that first day probably fueled the tank for days easily, because everyone was energized immediately going, this is going to be one hell of a ride. Yes. We don't know what it's going to be like, but it's going to be a hell of a ride.
Amazing, Trevor. I cannot believe that the first day on set from Michael Fassbender was him in the crowd.
Yeah, it is.
That's amazing. Anyway, okay, I'm now going to hand this interview over to you. The thing with Sophisticulture is we like to platform what artists want to talk about right now. Sometimes they're on a press tour and they don't necessarily have time to talk about the other things that really matter to them that are happening at the same time. And so what we like to do, switch the table over and ask you to bring a topic of your choosing. It can be anything from your favorite record all the way down to, the new dog treat you found for your dog, or even sometimes, and more likely, it is political. It is something that you can't necessarily talk about on a 30-second segment or a 2-minute segment on BBC News, say, or any other radio show. I believe you have a book out now. I have the title on my phone. Give me 1 second so that I can be a really good interviewer and say that it is called Shooting Crows.
It is.
And it is written on the 1994 Logan Island Massacre, which I believe is also called the World Cup Massacre.
It is, yeah. So, I think that
Please do educate us very, very, very dumb Brits about what that is, what that context is, and what that history is.
Well, I think, I told you that we started the journey on KNEECAP in 2019. But my life had been changed dramatically just a year previous, when on the 31st of August 2018 I was arrested.
Oh my goodness, this I did not know. I did all my research, this I did not know.
And I think it probably helped me with KNEECAP. I think KNEECAP gave me respect because I'd been in a police cell, and but I was arrested under the Official Secrets Act. And the allegation was that I had put a document into the public domain, which was a breach of the British Official Secrets Act. And actually, the story was that I had produced a documentary for an amazing director called Alex Gibney. Alex has won an Oscar for Taxi the Dark Side in 2008. We had formed a relationship after having a pint of Guinness together in Galway at the Film Flap.
Shout out Galway.
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 It is a fixture in my family's. Since my daughters were very young, they have been packed into the car with our friends and dogs and all sorts to go to Galway to the Film Flap every July. So I met Alex there, I think on one of my first visits to Galway in around 2009, 2010. And one thing led to another. We began to work together. And I sat in Alex's office on the west side of Manhattan one Friday afternoon. And I was flying back to Belfast that night. And Alex says, oh, what else are you working on? Or what are you doing? And I'm going, oh, this is a story. And I began to tell him about the story of the Logan Island Massacre on June 18th, 1994. And I asked him where he was on the night of June 18th, 1994, which was right at the start of the Soccer World Cup in the USA. England didn't qualify that year, but Ireland did. And, Ireland did. And Ireland, the whole of Ireland was coming to a halt for this match that was taking place in Giant Stadium outside New York and New Jersey, which wasn't that far from Alex's home. Alex said, I said, do you remember the night? He goes, oh yeah, that was the night. Ireland beat Italy. I said, absolutely. fantastic goal by, I'm a Liverpool fan, by Ray Houghton. Ray Houghton scored a goal which sent the ball flying over the Italian keeper, and Ireland won a victory. And I said, do you remember anything else about that? And he goes, no. I says, well, 6 men were watching that match in a small pub about 30 miles south of Belfast, and they'd all standing with their backs to the door in the pub when a masked gunman walked in and opened fire and murdered the 6, and it's called the Loughlin Island Massacre. And Ireland knows that victory that night. It's etched on the brains of every football fan in Ireland, but they also know it came with a very dark side on that night, and there was a very different message for the people of the north of Ireland and Loughlin Island, which is only weeks away from a ceasefire that happened that ultimately led to the Good Friday Agreement. But these 6 men were mown down, shot in the back, simply for watching a soccer game. So Alex and I began to work making a documentary. We made a short film for ESPN, and then we were determined to make the long-form investigative documentary, and we started a film that became No Stone Unturned. Amazing. And during that process, my colleague, journalist Barry McCaffrey, had been leaked a document, and that document really revealed the full horror of the attack, and that was that the police in Northern Ireland at that time, the RUC had actually colluded with the killers, both in the run-up to the attack and helped cover it up in the aftermath. So we got this document, this leaked document somebody had sent us anonymously. We put it in the film. The film was released at the New York Film Festival in October 2017.
So you were the people that released that document that,
yes.
that showed that.
Yeah.
I read that as just part of the Wikipedia page, but you were actually the instrumental force in getting that information out.
Yeah, well, you know, Alex is a brilliant storyteller, a master storyteller, and Alex knew the value of this. But you know, really, that document allowed us to identify the chief suspects. We solved the murder. You know, the police had failed to solve it, but we managed to solve the massacre, and were able to give the relatives who worked with us so patiently and so supportively throughout the process that we were able to give them some truth. They never got justice, but we were able to give them some truth. And the documentary went out, premiered in New York, came back to Ireland. It was a huge success. It was the biggest selling documentary at the box office in Ireland that year. And on the night of the premiere in Belfast, my friend, the solicitor, Anne Murphy, came to me and said, have you seen the statement from the police? And I said, oh, great. Have they made a statement? He says, oh, yeah, they're going to launch a new investigation. I'm going to, oh, great, into the massacre. He says, no, it's into you. And I went, hang on, they're launching an investigation into me. What? Because they're going to investigate the leak of the document. So can you imagine for a moment that you're sitting in the boardroom at the headquarters of the police, and they said, okay, let's stick on this film. And they all sit around and watch the film, and then they go, okay, now what do we do? And I didn't go, oh, well, let's investigate the killers. Well, wait, no. Let's go after the journalists who got the leaked document. And that's the decision they took. It's mind-blowing. The moral compass had been lost somewhere, and instead they come on. So I was at home with my family. Some family had come in from my wife Sheila's family had come in from London, and they were going to spend a wonderful bank holiday weekend in Belfast, which was very rudely disrupted by the arrival of dozens of armed police officers at 7 a.m. in the morning of the 31st of August, and came into my home, came through the door and arrested me in front of my wife and my family and took me away. And I can remember going, you're arresting me? What about the killers? And like, you're not going after the killers, you're arresting me. And I was taken to police cell, and I was held for 12 hours and then released without charge on bail. And anyway, long story short, I decided I'm going to write a book about it. We challenged the police, and ultimately we overturned the decision to arrest us, and we won a judicial review, and we were paid compensation. But I felt still a debt to the families of those men who died. And so about a year ago, I decided that I was going to write a book, and I spent a lot of the winter and into the spring writing the book. It was published. It's called Shooting Crows. And the title comes...
and publish a book in 1 year. Can we hold on?
Well, it's actually very interesting because, listen, you know, filmmaking is a very collaborative process. Yes. And you work as a part of an essential team. Yeah. That is no film. No. The director, the writer, the producer costume designer, it's a team sport. Writing a book is a very solitary and somewhat selfish act, in that you're taking time away from everybody else in your life to sit in a room with a computer or a typewriter or whatever you write it on, or a piece of paper. And in some ways, there's a yin to the yang in that. I enjoyed that process of being able to, I found it actually almost relaxing.
Oh, wow.
I found it actually cathartic. Yeah. Because it's about the trauma that was visited, nothing compared to the families who suffered as a result. But everything that had happened to me, I felt that it was time to try to get that story out, what happened to myself and Barry and to our family and friends and colleagues and all of that. So I felt it was important to get it down. And so about 6 weeks ago, we went back to the village of Loughin Island. Loughin Island isn't even a village. It's like a pub in one side of the road and a church on the other, in the most rural, beautiful part of Ireland. And we launched the book in the pub, in the very room in which the massacre had taken place, with the families around us. And I tell you, they are the most incredible, stoic, this complete lack of bitterness in these families, despite everything that they've gone through. Like so many people right across the divide in the north of Ireland. And so it was a real humbling moment to bring the book back, but to say, this is your story. This is the story of what happened to you, what was visited upon you, and how you reacted with great integrity and humility. And you've got your truth, and I wanted to document that truth. So yes, Shooting Crows is out in all good bookshops and on that bookshop in the sky, Amazon, and I highly recommend it. But yeah, it's been a busy year.
It's fascinating to me because the way I hear of books is you take 1 year to write the first draft and it takes multiple years before you're getting to being published. And it's a very intensive process to get it done in a year. But I think also what you're saying is that it was a topic you had been sitting with now and researching in the same way that Rich had done with KNEECAP for so long on this film that you had worked on for a long while. And
it's been 10 years. Yeah, it's been 10 years of my life.
A whole decade. And furthermore, that the police force that you were writing of would rather have put you in a cell for 12 hours than give any justice, not necessarily justice, but truth, to those families is dare I say, shameful on their part. But you, like you said, you gave them truth. I think there's nothing more you can give than a book that puts down the truth.
Right.
That it's in history. It's down. It cannot be erased. It cannot be removed.
Yep.
And it's amazing. So
and I think you're right. I think that, but listen, that's all part of our tortured past in the north of Ireland. We're still coming to terms with the legacy of the north. If you look at the new series that's just come out, I think it's on Disney, Say Nothing, by a friend of mine, Patrick Radden Keefe, wrote the book, and that's now been turned into a 9-part series, starring Anthony Boyle and Lola Pettigrew. And it's again dealing with a very dark side of our recent history. And there's so many families out there who have given up hopes of justice, but still cling to the hope that one day they might get the truth of why their loved one died, how their loved one died, why they were selected for death, who killed them and why. And I think that I just feel that these families in some ways are emblematic of families right across the north who are still dealing with the aftermath of conflict. Like so many people throughout the world, still dealing with conflict, and so many conflicts raging around the world right now. You think of what's going on in Gaza, and you think of, of what the people there have been subjected to is just horrific. And I think the book is really, it's just a very small contribution, but I hope it is a contribution to learning and understanding, appreciating what exactly those families went through, but thousands of other families went through as well.
Who aren't even to be named, and so I really appreciate that. I'm going to ask one final question, which is, other than your amazing book and this amazing story, which we wider communities of the world are less privy to and not always as connected to each other as something like this, is why I think KNEECAP and films like it are so important, because it's like we're all talking to each other now. I watched a movie called The Divided Island that was about the Turkish Cypriot divide on Cyprus, and of course, I have been watching over the last year what's been going on in Gaza, and so we're all talking to each other now, and we're realizing that we have so many similar stories
Right,
across
exactly.
the world. I'm Sudanese, and we've also got our own things going on.
Of course,
in Sudan.
of
So
course.
We're lucky that we get to talk now to each other in a way that's uninhibited by the powers that be.
Yes.
But I will say one last thing. Anything else you'd like to highlight, political or otherwise, for the pod, just as an artist for the pod?
Yeah, I think that listen, it's been an incredible year, and we've got a new documentary film that we hope will come out in 2025 that deals with the most amazing band that everyone has heard of, Culture Club.
Oh my goodness! Oh, now you've got me.
So we've been working with George and Roy and Mikey and John, and I've had the pleasure of their company throughout this year, which again is just surreal. You know, I grew up in the 80s in a very small town in the north of Ireland, and you know, Carmel Chameleon was a big part of the playlist there in the local disco, and suddenly to meet these guys and to sort of understand the love in that family of four, the dysfunction that's there in that family of four, but yet here they are still celebrating everything that they managed to achieve. And somehow we've worked in with the most amazing director, Alison Elwood, who directed the Eagles documentary, Laurel Canyon, did our Go-Go's documentary a few years ago that we took to Sundance, and has been working with a wonderful editor in North London, Paul Carlin, and we've a great team, and it's been the most enjoyable. Honest to God, it's been a riot. It's been an absolute riot, and I hope that everyone gets a chance to see it in 2025. It is amazing. Of course, I'm biased, but it's a very different kind of music story to KNEECAP, but still, it's a very similar story in so many ways, in that it's about people understanding their surroundings, interpreting their surroundings in the lyrics. And if you look at George's lyrics and what he was singing about back in those seminal albums, that it is still as fresh. And I still go back and listen to George singing, such a young man at the time, and some of those songs and the lyrics are absolutely heartbreaking. And the voice, the voice. And of course there is an Irish link because his parents were Irish, and so George grew up with a mum singing Irish songs, so yeah, I mean that's been fantastic, and I look forward to sharing that with audiences in 2025.
I cannot wait. I'm shaking with excitement. Culture Club, listen, I may have happened quote unquote before my time, but that is on the playlist regularly. Boy George is the one and only, so I very much look forward to that. Do we have any details about where that's going to be, what time that's
No, it's a bit too early. We were just trying to wrap it up in the edit right now and head into post-production, but we're hoping it's going to come, it's going to come sometime in 2020. We really don't know.
Please keep us updated.
We will.
We would love to be a part of helping
Don't worry.
people find it. So thank you so much. Thank you for your time, Trevor.
Thank you. It's been amazing. Absolutely wonderful.
And I will hopefully have you back for the Culture Club.
Look forward to it.
Indeed, that was Sophisticulture, a podcast by OBSCURAE Productions. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider buying us a coffee. Your support helps us continue bringing you our coverage and episodes, including the podcast, our articles, and our TikToks. The link is in the podcast description. Thanks so much for listening. Take care.